Hello and welcome to episode 5 of creating the VFX selection and deselection markers. We're just going to start this episode with a fix for a typo in the previous episode. The error was in our find terrain, location and normal function here. Just got to remove those extra minus signs. I'm not sure how I did that and why I didn't notice, but definitely not what you need. With that sorted, we'll go back to implementing our marker component on an entity. Now for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use this default character. So in here, under public, I'm going to add the interface, marker interface, and that's added the include. And we want to implement all of these. So actually what I might do is create a section for it. Where do we go? Sorry. This is what I want. And character. And the reason why I do this is you get this, if you hold control, you can go straight to it. So handy. You don't have to scroll to the top or whatever and go through here. It's just a little, I think it's pretty cool, little shortcut. Oh, I think I made a mistake on the interface. This needs to be not implemented. There we go. Yeah, close that. Get rid of all this now. The entity, so we can override these functions. I should have just copied over that with override, eh? Oh. Override. Right, implement those. Before we go into this, we're going to need another function. So let's come back. It doesn't need to be on the interface, but we're going to need, well, the way I'm going to set it up, you might have a different setup, but I'm going to have a data, like a primary data asset that will have the data for the entity. We're going to need we need to create the asset. Let's just do that. So under data, I'm just going to create I just realized too that I forgot to click public. So the CPP and H file is just all in the, it doesn't make a difference, to be honest, it doesn't really matter. But if you're wondering like why I did that, that's because I didn't select, if I select public here, it'll divide it into the public and private folders. So our data asset, we're going to make it RTS marker data asset. In the data folder. And we're going to need our first setting is going to be what actual data asset type is this. Again, same setup as all my other data assets that I've done in other tutorials. So if you've got any of those, you could be able to copy this first part straight out. We're just overriding the get primary data asset ID, so it returns this type. Asset ID. Overriding this get primary asset ID to return whatever data type we set this as and the name of this asset. So we're going to want a few settings here and they're all going to be similar headers to this. We'll change the category to, well, for this one it'll be effects for the first one. We'll make them soft object pointers. So if we don't use it, it's not loaded. Not material instance, sorry. What are they? They're Niagara system. And again, I'm going to do the include, not the for declaration. That selection. Destination. So that's those default ones done, and now we need the, oh sorry, I'll change this category to materials. Keep it separated. Oops. And this one will be just settings. Now you could have settings, different settings for each of these markers. I'll leave that up to you. All my markers are going to be the same size. Just going to duplicate this one and make height, I'll call it height offset. Now the other thing we could do is actually have booleans for, does it have a destination marker? Does it have a preview marker? Does it have a selection marker? Maybe we only want, selection and destination. We don't want preview, and so we don't want it to create the component on the entity at all. Let's do some settings for that. And that'll do these as human8 again. So it has selection marker. And I'm just going to default them all to true, like so. And the other way to do this is just to check if these are null. Like if any of these are null, just don't create it. But this will allow you to have like all of these set to something, and like, you know what, I just want to disable this for now. We're not using it, something like that. Up to you. And I think that's it for the settings. So back in on our character, we're going to create a function to get that data. I'm going to return data asset. And we're going to have another function to load that data as well. We'll need a parameter for the, sorry, back on the character. We'll need a parameter for the ID. I'm just going to put it in the public section for now, but it will need to be blueprint assignable. If you've already got an existing setup, you can integrate this data into anything, like if you already got a data for your characters or whatever. But I'm just going to put it as a variable on the character. When I get into the editor, I'm just going to assign it directly. So the blueprint, yeah, read write, edit anywhere. This will be a primary data asset ID. When we come to getting marker data, that's the first thing we want to check, is it valid? Don't know if we, forgot to assign it or whatever it did, but we just don't want to do anything. Just get out. If we do have an asset ID, we want to use that ID to get the actual data asset. We're going to cast it to our type, so it'll be the marker data asset. And the one we're after is the asset object. And that's from our ID. And that's just adding the include for the data asset at the top. And we just need to return null. Might make this a wrapper instead of a return, so I don't have two return null pointers. The load data is going to be similar to this. We're going to get our asset manager. We're going to check if both are valid. Again. And if it is, just create a bundle here. Not using it. By the way, this is probably an opportunity where you could use a bundle. On our data asset, we could actually automatically load all these soft object pointers if we put a bundle tag on these. I think it includes bundle or something. Anyway, if anyone's just interested in the bundle stuff, just hit me up in the comments or the Discord. But what it does is if we put say a bundle for marker assets and added it to all these. When you load this ID file with the bundle name, it'll load all these soft object pointers. So you don't have to do that load synchronous every time you go to use one. It'll just load them all. However, if you're not using them all, it'll still load them all. So just be aware of that. I'm just creating a delegate to a function here once it's loaded. And this is where we'll reference our create markers function. So it'll be, this. And we're just loading one asset here, not an array of assets. So let's just load primary asset, not assets. Didn't already include that? Didn't? Yeah. Oh, it doesn't want to be const. It's doing stuff. Yep. All right, now they've got those, we want to, well, first of all, we want to call this somewhere on like begin play. So it loads whatever's there. And then that'll create the markers when it's loaded. And we should be all good to go. And we want to use this function here, get marker data. I'm just going to copy this for all these. So these are going to be, again, very repetitive, but this is what it is. So all of them are going to have, if we want to copy this in. So that gets us a reference to our marker data. And then we can return whatever we're after. So we're after this one, after the selection, or it would be Ligara system selection. And then this is returning, if you have a look at the marker data, oops, it's the soft pointer, so we need to load it. So we're going to do the load synchronous. That'll return the actual pointer. And this can be const. And if we fail to get the data or anything like that, we're just going to return null pointer. And these are all going to be very similar. So we're just creating getters for our data asset. And material, marker size. All right, so this one is destination. I need the load for this one. So now to do these, we need to actually have references to our markers. Let's add those. I'll put these, I'll just put them here. So we can see them in the editor. We'll make them blueprint, read wire, edit anywhere. Don't really need a category for these. Marker component, and it's going to include the H file. Oh, sorry, we can include a forward declaration here. And selection marker component. We want to create the markers. Oops. We probably don't need that create markers on the interface actually, now I think about it, because you only really want to do that here once the data is loaded. You don't want to call create markers from somewhere else, but that's okay. And we're actually going to check before we do create markers is that we have valid data, because we're going to need to read from the data. Oops. So now we want to create an array of marker types. This is what that template was for. So that's going to include the marker component.h. So if you recall at the start, we created this template function here, which returns all our enum values, which includes no marker, by the way, but we're going to handle that. So for our markers now, Now this switch here, I'm gonna add a switch for the type. Oops. Mark the type that we're up to. So we're going to remove the no marker. Sorry, if it is no marker type, then we want to not break, we want to just continue. So that'll continue to the next iteration of the for loop. And then if it's these other types, we want to check if our settings, if you recall in our, we had the has marker stuff here, so to create it or not. If the marker type comes through as, what's first, selection, and we have set that to false, we don't want a selection marker, then we're also going to continue on to the next one, and that will be the same for destination and preview. So if any of those are turned, that's what controls whether it creates it or not. Now we're going to need, when we go to create the actual component, we're going to need a name for the component, so we're going to create one based on the enum. Oops, outside the loop. Let's just put that down a bit. So that gets us the enum name as a string, and then we just want to make a component name with that. So this will be the unique name, but we're just going to add it to an existing. So we're just going to insert the enum value into here. Sorry, the enum name, not value. So then that'll give us all the components, or we call marker component underscore selection, destination, preview, whichever one it is. And then we're ready to create our component. So to create a component at runtime, we need to use new object. I'm going to attach to this or belong to this, our entity, and we're going to use that name we just created. Yeah. So if that marker comes back as valid, then we can start setting up the marker, the component. So the first thing we want to do, so now we can attach the component. So we're using attach to component to attach this component to the root component of this entity. And then we want to set the marker type. So at this point, the marker is ready to run that on register function and set it up. We can call that, and we can call that through just registering the component. Because we'll call that on component register. What's it called? On register. This will get called after it's finished its registration process, whatever it does. And there's this one more function that's called add instance component. And we're going to pass that. And that's just, I think it does like interfacing to blueprints, so you can see it in the editor or something like that. If I'm wrong there, someone can correct me, but I find you need this to be able to see it. And the last thing we want to do again is a switch. Actually, I'll just copy the whole switch. Because we need to assign this newly created component to whichever variable that we created on this character. So we need to assign it to the appropriate ones of these so we can easily access it. So in here, we can just switch on the type, select it. And I can take that out at default. And no marker, we should never get to here anyway. So that's creating our components on our entity now. So I think what we might do here is a build. Check if we've got, oops. Writer defaults to V5, so I was just trying to build Unreal Engine there. So there, choose the thing, so you can ignore that if you're not using Writer or made the same mistake. Alright, looks like it's built successfully. There's some warning. Looks like it's nothing to do with us, so we'll accept that. And I'll fire up the editor. So I think the first thing we'll do is come to here, create a folder called data. And we'll create our marker data asset under miscellaneous data asset. And we'll find our RTS marker data. Call it DA for data asset. Marker data. I'm just going to call it a default. And we need to define our data type in the project settings. So let's go to our asset manager, the primary asset types to scan, and this is what tells the asset manager where it can find the actual assets to load. So this is just a name here. So this would be the type name. So I'm going to call it marker data. And we need to point that to the actual class that is our marker data, which is the data asset. And then where does it go to get them? This is happening since Unreal Engine 5.4 for me. Every time I click on the directory, it has this breakpoint. You just go, it must be asserting on something. It doesn't affect anything. You can come straight back in here and do this. But if you get that or you don't, doesn't matter. Keep going. So it's going to be in data. It'll do. So you can create that wherever. Just make sure you point that to wherever you create your data asset. And that's it. That's the data asset added. So now when we come back to our data, we should be able to assign it as marker data. Can we, yep, so this is our marker, and you can use different markers for everything like I said, but I'm going to be using the same for all of them. And then same for the material, just use our material instance. Let's go to the material there, so I can quickly assign these ones. Again, I'm just using all the same one with different parameters. Marker height offsets, I must have set that wrong somewhere. I'll put it to 5, and we want all the markers, that's good. So while we're in the project settings too, by the way, if we come to, should have this under game RTS marker settings now, and you should be able to set the channel. And I think if you create any custom channels, they'll come up here as well. I generally have a custom channel for terrain, but like I said, I'm going to leave it to visibility so I can place it on things and show that. And display on selected options there, and I might bring that down actually, 50. Oh, actually it doesn't really matter because we're not going to be moving. In order to demonstrate this, we're going to have to do some work. So I can't just drag material in or anything like, or effect in to show. So what I'm going to do for this template is set it up so we have a basic input like an RTS. So I'm not going to do movement or anything. It will just be a simple input for select, and we'll be able to move the mouse around to show the preview, and we'll be able to left click to show a destination, and obviously the unit will have a selected. And we'll continue with that in episode 6, as well as debugging any issues that we might come across.